Jesus Christ and Lucifer. The church wants you to believe that they're enemies, but what if they were actually the same? Not only does the Bible itself contain strong evidence towards this, but the evidence also exists in many secret gospels and Christian books that were banned and destroyed by the church. Now, why did the church destroy these so-called blasphemous and heretical books? Because of what they revealed. Many of them claimed to contain the secret truth. Could Jesus, the self-proclaimed light of the world and morning star, be the same being as Lucifer, whose name in Latin literally means light bringer and morning star? And could they have the same mission, to set humanity free and ultimately overthrow God? My name is Morgue, and I'm all about bringing the light of knowledge to the world.
Hello everyone, Namaste. My name is Reverend Father Joseph Lagumbay, a liberal and progressive Catholic priest from the Catholic Universalist Church, and welcome to the Corporate Mystic. Now today, we will talk about Morgue's video about Jesus and Lucifer being one person. But before that, intro. So first, let's talk about Morgue. I found Morgue on YouTube several years ago, and I am fascinated by his videos. No, ang dami niyang magagandang videos, and his videos are, really controversial, and it speaks of the truth about the history of Christianity. Just like Morgue, I am also a victim of religious trauma syndrome. Because you see, I am a liberal and progressive Christian. I am a liberal and progressive Catholic priest. So in our church, we accept the LGBT community. We are open to the idea of reincarnation, and we are also open to the idea that Christianity is not the only true religion, because all path leads to God. Now, when I saw Morgue's videos, it has this dark theme. However, he speaks of truth, and this video does not really intend to discredit, or does not intend to put Morgue in a bad light. Rather, I am just trying to put the appropriate context of his videos, because I myself consider myself as a Gnostic Christian. The only difference between Morgue and I is that Morgue has actually left the Christian church and started his own movement, which is Hyperianism. However, for me, I actually came back to church. However, I am working as a liberal and progressive Christian minister. So, my idea about religion is more on the reformation and restoration of the Christian faith in accordance to the original teachings of our Lord and Master Yeshua. However, Morgue is trying to, destroy the very institution of Christianity. So maybe that's where we are different. But for now, the main topic is about, is Lucifer and Jesus one person or one entity? Now, before that, let me give you a very brief synopsis of what is Gnosticism. And once we discuss Gnosticism, we will go to this topic in a short while. Now, if this is your first time watching, please click like, also click subscribe, and also ring the notification bell, so that next time, if you will view my videos, you'll be one of the first few people who will be able to see it. All right? So let's go. Modern Christianity is not faithful to the authentic teachings of Jesus. Gnostics were the original Christians. Maybe you haven't heard of the Gnostics because the Gnostics was considered to be a heretic by the church. Ang mga Gnostics ay pinagpapatay at pinagsusunog noong unang panahon because they were speaking of a different truth than the Roman Catholics. Ang mga Gnostics kasi, they believe that God is within them and you don't need priests so that you can connect to the divine, because God is within you, and when you access God within you, and when you live according to the teachings of the Christ, which is the image and likeness of the living God, we will also transform to become the Christ. Gnosticism speaks of the Christhood of everyone, the priesthood of everyone. It was the original teachings of our Lord and Master Jesus. Let me start from Valentinus. Valentinus was supposed to be elected as the Bishop of Rome or the Pope during the 2nd century. However, he was considered to be a heretic because he was teaching Gnosticism. He was teaching these things that I'm saying to you right now. And what's fascinating is that the early church even believed in reincarnation. It was not Valentinus himself, but Origen, the first century church father, actually believed in reincarnation. He called it apokatastasis, or the restoration of all souls to its original form. And according to Origen, because we were all created by God, we will all go back to God through a process of transmigration, and we call that in Buddhism reincarnation. Now, sino ba ito si Valentinus? Valentinus was actually trained by Theodus, and Theodus was actually an inner disciple of the Apostle Paul. Now, let's go to Apostle Paul. Si Apostle Paul, he was a Jew, and he was converted into one of the followers of Jesus Christ, and then he carried the Jewish teachings of Jesus to the Gentiles. Now, kasi hindi makarelate yung mga Gentiles, Paul actually tried to tone down his explanation about the mysticism of Jesus. So, may dalawang uri ng disciple si Paul. He has an outer disciple and he also has inner disciples. The outer disciples, he was teaching the things that evolve today as modern and mainstream Christianity. However, his inner disciples were the ones being taught by the mystical truths that was taught to him by the original apostles of our Lord and Master Jesus. And this is Gnosticism. Now, Gnosticism believes that the Bible is a book that is not meant to be understood literally, but rather it's meant to be understood figuratively. So the Bible contains spiritual truths but not historical facts. So if we just know how to read the Bible, we will get nuggets of wisdom from it. Now, bakit may mystical teachings si Jesus? Going back to Jesus in Galilee, Jesus was actually a Kabbalist. What is a Kabbalist? Kabbalah is the ancient form of Jewish mysticism. And in Kabbalah, there are concepts like reincarnation, and in Jewish, it's called Gilgulum. They teach that the soul evolves through countless lifetimes in order for it to attain perfection and be reunited with the source or God. And once you get perfected, you will become the Christ. Now, Jesus, on his time, he became the Christ. He became the perfected form of human being, the perfect Adam, the Bar Inash, or the Son of Man. And because of that, he is now teaching the world on how to evolve, on how to become the perfect man or the perfect Adam. If we try to look at the story of Jesus, it was said that Jesus daw was born of a virgin birth. Actually, hindi virgin si Mama Mary. It was a mistranslation. Hindi virgin birth, but it was young lady. The original Hebrew word was young lady, but it was transformed into a virgin because they were some like synonymous. Now, Jesus became the Christ when he started his training with John the Baptist. Now, John the Baptist was actually the tzaddik or the master of Jesus Christ. He was trained by John the Baptist. At makikita natin yan when Jesus was baptized by John in the river of Jordan. That was actually his initiation so that Jesus will be one of the members of his spiritual circle. Now, Jesus meditated for 40 days and 40 nights and he was tempted by the devil. And then after he defeated the devil, he started getting his own disciples. And if we try to look at the story of Jesus Christ, it is very similar to the story of Prince Siddhartha Gautama in India 500 years before the birth of Jesus. Now, what can we say about this parallels of the story? It simply means that Jesus was a mystic and that what happened to Jesus can also happen to us. And what Jesus was teaching is actually to reconnect to the divine or to the God within us so that we will transform according to the image and likeness of this God within us. So we need to understand first the context of Lucifer, Satan, and Jesus. Let's start first with Lucifer. Actually, according to the Christian narrative, Lucifer and the devil are actually one and the same. But actually, it is not, because Lucifer is a different entity. The idea of Lucifer being a fallen angel has been developed by the Judeo-Christian tradition. However, if we really try to look at the history where Lucifer or the morning star the word morning star came from, it is actually from the Babylonian and the Mesopotamian mythologies. So if we could remember that the Jews, the early Jews, were actually captured by the Babylonians, and because of that, Jews were able to enhance their theology because of the theological inputs of the Babylonians. And if we really try to dig deep within the theology of the Jews, no, it is a combination of Egyptian, Mesopotamian, Babylonian, even Persian, and all other religious tradition that predates Judaism. So in ancient times, before the time of Jesus, the Jews were actually not a religion of the book. Diba, right now we see them only basing on the Torah or whatever book that they have. But before, no, they were actually a religion of desert mystics. So their leadership, the leadership within the Jews in ancient times, were actually ruled by prophets. So diba, if we can see in the Bible, there were so many prophets because before the times of the kings, it was the prophets who were leading the people. And with that being said, the authoritarian book of the Jews actually came later on because they needed to have a doctrine. They needed to have something to stand for so that other countries or other races will not be able to, belittle them, not be able to attack them. So that's what happened. So in the Old Testament, especially in the book of Isaiah, there was a mention there of the morning star. But actually, the morning star, or Lucifer, again, came from the Babylonian mythology, and it does not refer to any satanic being. Number two, Satan is also not a figure or an entity, or let's say a deity, like that has a human-like feature that manipulates the lives of human beings. So Satan is actually a personification of resistance, a personification of our very own, let's say, karma. Satan is the personification of the evil inclination of the heart, which is the Yetzer Hara, and God is actually a personification of Yetzer Hatov. So, going back to the ancient Jews, the Jews were actually believers of non-duality. The early Jews were actually mystics.
In the original Hebrew, the word Satan means accuser or adversary and is used to reference humans as a celestial being. When used to reference a celestial being, the word is accompanied by the definitive article, making it clear that the name Satan is not a name at all, but a title. Satan is not accuser, but the accuser. It's his job title. Satan is not a fallen angel opposing God from the depths of hell, but rather Satan is actually a part of God's court and carrying out his assigned duties. We see this best in the book of Job. Here, Satan actually arrives with a group of angels, making it clear that he himself is also an angel. Satan doesn't make a bet with God that he can break Job, as is the common Christian narrative, but rather Satan merely points out the apparently obvious. Job is only faithful to God because he has abundantly blessed him. In order to prove that this isn't the case, God allows Satan to carry out his duties as the accuser, but within parameters. Further difficulties arise when the book of Job is taken as a historical account by Christians, who then use the book to support a living biography of the deeds of Satan. However, it's quite clear from the way that Job is written that it is a work of poetry, a text meant to explore some of the deepest and most painful theological questions, such as why do bad things happen to good people, and how should they respond when they do? Jesus' reference to Job is not a surprise then, as Jesus himself taught exclusively through parables. The writers of the Old Testament did not believe in a literal devil, but rather understood that the temptation to do evil lived in all of us. However, these beliefs began to gradually change, and sometime in the late BCs and early ADs, Satan became a specific being, which was diametrically opposed to God. Coincidentally enough, this is also when Zoroastrianism began to exert a greater and greater influence on Jewish culture. In Zoroastrianism, good and evil exist in equal measures and are diametrically opposed. However, evil is limited by space and time, while good is not. Thus, when the world ends and space and time run out, evil will simply cease to exist, leaving only good to triumph. This powerful duality clearly has an influence on Jewish beliefs, who began to identify Satan as a specific figure forever in opposition to God and his people, as evidenced by Satan's greater role in later Jewish books of the Old Testament. Satan developed many of the parallels of Zoroastrianism duality, including a near-peer opposition to God, but an inability to outright defeat him. Satan too would eventually be defeated at the end of days, and only good would remain to rule over creation, exactly like Zoroastrianism. Jesus himself likely saw Satan in the same traditional sense that the ancient Jews did, as an internal temptation and not a physical being with the power to do evil and oppose God. This is because the account of the three temptations of Christ are widely accepted as having been a symbolic representation of Jesus' internal struggles and doubts at the start of a ministry he knew would end in his death, and not literal events. Once more given to the fact that Jesus almost exclusively taught in parables, this is a very likely conclusion. His first temptation was the temptation to use his power to fulfill his own selfish needs, or hedonism. If Jesus could heal the sick, he could use that same power to fulfill every lust and desire in his heart. His second temptation was the temptation to glorify himself instead of God. Often pressed in on all sides by adoring crowds, Jesus would have easily been tempted to use his massive influence and support to take leadership of the nation for himself, or to simply develop a cult of personality. The biblical account of Jesus atop the temple was a representation of how Jesus could show off his supernatural powers in front of crowds of people and gain their support or adoration. His third temptation was to use his power to indulge his materialism. With his God-given power, Jesus could have been a great ruler if he wished, yet he didn't come to grow political or economic power but to begin a spiritual revolution. While he could have been a king, he instead chose the role of a servant. The fact that no mountain peak could actually show all the kingdoms of the earth makes it clear once more that this is a symbolic representation of Jesus' early internal struggles. The early Christians certainly believed that Satan was a physical being completely opposed to God, the pinnacle of all evil. That belief has continued to the present day and even influenced non-Christians. Yet the earliest biblical accounts, unadulterated by the growing influence of Zoroastrianism or other dualistic religions, make it clear that Satan is not a devil hell-bent on overcoming God, but rather merely another member of God's angelic court. However, as God's prosecutor, he is the closest that a Jew, Christian, or Muslim has to a supernatural enemy, even if the accuser is not trying to destroy faith, but rather grow it by pointing out where it's weakest. A modern belief in Satan as the enemy of God is simply doctrinally unsound, as humanity itself only rebelled against God when they ate the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. As they were the first and only beings to eat this fruit, no angel could have possibly rebelled against God in the way that mankind did.
Now, we also need to understand that we can generally say that there are three types of Jesus. So we have the Christian Jesus, which is found in the Bible, and which is the one being preached today in Christian churches. We also have the Gnostic Jesus, which Morgue was trying to show us, and we also have the historical Jesus. Now, all these three types of Jesus, quote unquote, are actually intersecting, or let's say they're overlapping with each other, because most of the Christian text that we use today is heavily influenced by Gnosticism. As discussed earlier, these Gnostic texts, though it came on later, let's say 2nd, 3rd century, like 2 to 3 generations after the time of our Lord and Master Jesus, this has evolved in a way that it created a narrative, a different narrative about Jesus, because we need to really put our mind into that certain situation. These were Gentiles, these were Romans, these were Greeks, and these are not Jews. They didn't have any idea what was the Jewish culture, and they really don't know Jesus personally. So they have used myths and metaphors in order to create a spiritual path. So in general, that's what happened to Gnosticism. So Gnosticism has evolved from Kabbalah. The creation myth of Gnosticism was actually first formulated by Valentinus. Now, Valentinus and his followers, and also the followers of Paul, at least the inner disciples of Paul, they know that the whole idea of Gnosticism was actually a mythologem. What is a mythologem? A mythologem is a myth that guides us towards our spiritual growth or spiritual evolution. It is a myth that is shared by everyone. So if we really put everything into context, the early Christians knew that the Jesus story is a myth, and it is far from the actual historical teachings of Jesus. But we can't say that it is not effective, though they have created a myth, a Gnostic Jesus. It actually served as a path for the early Christians, because in this myth they have actually combined other mythologies, even Greek and Roman mythologies has been imbued in the story of Jesus. And guess what? The Gnostic Jesus was actually the basis of the Christian Jesus. So they are very close with each other. Now, for the historical Jesus, we really don't have enough data about that. That's why some Bible scholars would really say that Jesus did not exist. However, for me and for other Bible scholars that has taught me about this path, Jesus was a real human being. His name was Yeshua ben Yosef. It's just that his story was heavily radicalized. His story was heavily twisted in a way that it would fit the narrative that the Roman Church was trying to put out. So this is what happened. we only have a little fragment of the historical Jesus, and we have a copy of that. So I can actually put the link below, and also I can put a link at the end of this video. I will connect you to my spiritual advisor and my teacher, Bishop Louis Keizer. He is a Bible scholar, and he wrote so many books about this topic, about the historical Jesus. That is, if you want to know the whole deal about the historical Jesus, though we are not able to really look into the actual historical Jesus, we can actually take a look at the historical teachings of Jesus that survived in the Gospel of Thomas and also survived in the canonical Gospels. So for now, Jesus being Lucifer, this is very Sethian mythology. This is a very Sethian mythology. So Gnosticism was actually a broad term that was used by Bible scholars to classify a group of Christians who believed in Gnosis, who believe in God within and, accessing God within. But there are different types of Gnostics. And guess what? The Gnostics didn't even call themselves as Gnostics. So they just call themselves Christians, right? They go to church. However, they have an inner, or let's say esoteric practices aside from just going to church. So in the 2nd to 3rd century, during the time of Valentinos, Christians were heavily mixed up before the Council of Nicaea. So that was the time wherein Christians were actually united in a way. However, those who has received the inner teachings of Paul, or received the inner teachings of Valentinos, which were Gnostics, they have a different circle. So after they go to church, they have their own method of worship as well, and they have their own way of interpreting the Christian myth, and they understood the myth, right? So Jesus being Lucifer is a myth, right? So I am actually agreeing to Morgue in a way that Jesus is Lucifer. However, this Jesus was the Gnostic Jesus. The Gnostic Jesus is actually the mythological Lucifer, because Lucifer tried to free humans from this, from the chains of religion. Because during that time, if you're a Christian and you don't adhere to the teachings of the Church of Rome, you will be killed. You will be excommunicated, right? You will be put into jail. You will be tortured. So that's what happened. All right. So that's why the Gnostic movements, 3rd, 4th, 5th century until Middle Ages, they have become very radical and they have been very firm on their faith in fighting the mainstream church. So doon na nagsimula, that was the start of the division between the church. So the Gnostics hid underground, like figuratively and literally, while the mainstream church flourished. And voila, we have Christianity as we have today. However, there were Gnostic gospels that survived, and there were lineages of Gnostics that survived. There were Gnostic bishops that has passed their apostolic succession, and by God's grace, I have also received an ordination from this lineage. That's why I am able to speak about these things, about Gnosticism. Okay, so I hope you've learned something new today. And yeah, if you have questions about Gnosticism, if you agree or you disagree with whatever I say, just put a comment below, all right? So yeah, as much as possible, I will try to answer your questions. So if there's nothing else, thank you so much for watching. This has been Father Joseph Lagumbay from the Catholic Universalist Church saying, Namaste.